welcome one of the all-time greats at BYU. Played receiver in 1981 and 1983 through 1985. Caught passes from Jim McMahon, Steve Young, Robbie Bosco, and at least one pass from Blaine Fowler.
Oh, he caught a few. He
also spent 8 seasons with the Chicago Bears and remains a broadcaster in the Chicago market on WGN. A pleasure to welcome Glen Kozlowski to the Wise Guys. Glen, good evening. Thanks for being with us.
Sure. I got a face for radio and a voice for newspapers. So honestly, can you see me? Because really, I don't want people to see me. I'm just a kind of an ugly, overweight guy.
We see you just fine. Now, you've traded Chicago winters for Utah winters as you're living back out here. What was the coldest winter you ever went through back there in Chicago?
Well, in 88, we played the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, and it was Bears weather, right? It was 27 below. And, of course, they beat us 21-7. So, Bears weather really didn't matter. They had a guy named Jerry Rice and another guy named Joe Montana, and they beat us that day, and that's how it works, right? So, but, yeah, it was funny because it was so cold that I put my cleats up against the heaters, and it melted everything. And my cleats, I just basically put on tennis shoes in the second half because there was no way I was going to be able to do anything.
Certainly in your years there, Koz, you had more than one game where it was cold and snowy, and that's just Chicago. Did you ever think, what in the heck am I doing here? Why am I not playing for the Niners or in San Diego? What am I doing in Chicago? Did you ever question that with that kind of weather?
No, I was just happy to play, honestly, Blaine. As you know, I blew my knee out my senior year, and I didn't know if I'd ever play again. Back then, nobody came back from the injury. I tore all my ligaments, broke my kneecap. Brent Pratley, our team doctor at the time, did a really good job of, laying back and putting stitches in my meniscus. So I was able to play. So I was very fortunate. And you know what? Every day that I got to play for Chicago, I was thrilled to death because, I thought it was over. And, I got a second lease. Dick will love me. And, the rest is history. But, yeah, I made my living on special teams. But one of the things I'll say about Blaine, too, people don't realize this. Blaine and Robbie were probably the two best quarterbacks, besides Jim McMahon. I'm going to say that because Jim was the best I ever played with. But these two guys went at it in spring practice. And I think they did a coin toss to figure out who was going to start. And the only regret I have is I wish I could have sent Blaine on a mission because he would have been an unbelievable starting quarterback for BYU. But, the rest is history. And, I'm proud of what he's accomplished. And, he and I are going to be a trivia question, right?
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
First pass.
Tell him that. Like, we're an obscure trivia, right? You and I together, right, Koz?
Yes, 100%. First pass ever completed in 1984 because Blaine came in and he was the tailback. They flipped it to him. I think Chris Doman crushed you.
Yeah, right in my chin. Put a big knot on my chin for sure.
I know. Just 10-toed Blaine, and he threw it out there, and I was a little slow, and I had to dive to catch it. Ended up breaking my other elbow when I caught it. So, that was the year, and honestly, I look back on it now, and I'm just proud of all my teammates, and especially Blaine, what he's done in his career and what he's doing now. And I get to watch you guys all the time, and I really enjoy your guys' show.
Thank you. Not only was that the first catch of that undefeated season, it was the first pass reception in the history of ESPN's live sports.
Yes, it was. You're right. I forgot about that. We were the first, national broadcast for ESPN. So Blaine and I will always be in the trivia side of things.
There we go. Saying Koz came back to me and he's like, dude, could you not have made it a little bit better throw? I had to dive for that one. And I says, Koz, you don't know the dudes that just hit me. And then we watched it on film and Koz was like, you know what? I guess that was okay. You did get smacked in the face on that one. I'll give you that.
Oh, he got crushed. And it really caught him off guard. And honestly, the fact that he even threw it. And then, of course, we got lucky because I think Dave Mills and I broke Chris Doman's ankle.
Yes.
The next series later, I hit him high and Dave hit him low. And it was over for him for the day. But,
so Koz,
it worked out for us.
You probably remember. Do you remember the game where Kyle Van Noy just took over the bowl game down in San Diego? And I had said I had never seen a defensive guy control a football game single-handedly like that. except for Chris Dolman at the beginning of our Pittsburgh game until Koz and Millsy knocked him out. We literally couldn't move the ball because of him, right? He was like single-handedly stopping us, right?
Well, remember, Robbie's first pass ended up in the third row of the Pittsburgh side of the stadium. I mean, he just floated this thing. It was a little hitch. And he literally – and he was throwing it, I believe it was to me, or maybe it was Mark Bellini, and Mark just looked at it and just followed it. And, I'm looking at it going, wow, that is, we're thinking this is going to be a long day. But it turned out to be okay. And, the cool part about it is, and Blaine, you understand this, I look at BYU this year, they didn't have confidence. And when you lose confidence, you start losing games. And it really was apparent this year. And, I don't know how you regain it, but you and I both know that when we played, we thought we could beat everyone. We wanted to play everyone, and please, sign us up because we'll go wherever you want to. And we just believed that we're going to beat everyone, and that's why we did. I mean, really, would you not agree, Blaine?
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy is if you expect to win. And Glenn, we talk about this, and sometimes I talk about it with the guys that are there now. You kind of have to have the mentality, like even if you get down in a game early, you'll remember, Glenn, we get down in a game and we'd go, well, this isn't going to last. Like, we will absolutely come back. Nobody can beat us. I don't care if we're down by 14. We'll figure out a way to come back and win. And even when we would occasionally lose, we would say to ourselves, well, that's just an aberration. That's just not right. That'll never happen again. Well, we won't lose again. And you almost have to approach games with that mentality to play free and to play loose and to play fast. And that's a hard mentality to get. I don't know why we had it in such abundance. I mean, and
we were all cocky, Blaine.
That's
Let's
true.
be honest.
But
every one of us thought we were the best.
You've been at this a long time. Not only did you play at the highest level, you've coached in high school very successfully. You and Sluggo, Dave Mills coached together.
Yeah.
What kinds of things can you do to instill that in a team? Because and I know how unbelievably important that mentality is, that you are just going to win no matter what.
Right. And I mean, I look back on it now and I'm going, man, I remember in Hawaii, we were down 7. There was like 2 minutes to go. And there was 4 people just giving it to me the whole game, right? They were right behind our bench. So they were like, hey, Kozlowski, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I'm going to go down and score with the rest of the team. And, of course, we did, right? Robbie threw a pass. I caught it. And then when I came off and I looked at him, I was taking a drink. They all 4 stood up and started clapping and said, you guys are out of your minds, but you're cool to watch. And it was, that was kind of it. I mean, we just never thought we would lose. And, we just we believed in each other. And to this day, we still keep in touch with each other. And, I think the one thing that really separated our, 84 was we genuinely loved each other. And I think that still holds true today. And Blaine's shaking his head, but I'm telling you, Dave, it was unique, but we never, ever thought we were going to lose a game. And, we would fight with each other half the time. Mark Bellini, Adam Haysbert. So I had the ability to go to either X or Z. And so I'd hear the play call, and then I'd jump to the other side, and Bellini and I would be fighting in the huddle because everybody thought they could make the play. And, I mean, that was it. And, listen, Blaine comes in, we're going to make plays. In fact, he kept my streak alive in 84 because you threw the only pass to me against Tulsa, right?
That's right.
I caught it, and of course I hurt myself, and then I had to go out. But yeah, it is funny as I look back on it now. It's just, it was unique. We just loved each other, and quite frankly, we just wanted to play football, and we thought we could beat everyone.
One of our live streamers tonight's Mike Z, just me, says, Glenn, my younger brother served his mission in Chicago and had several meals at Jim McMahon's house.
Was Jim hosting the missionaries back in those days?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Nancy was active, and Julie and her were really close. And Jim, the weird part about it is the elders would show up, and Jim would be in his thong bikini body from cutting grass with no shirt on, right? And these poor missionaries are looking at him like, oh, what am I doing? And, Julie and I would go over, and we'd have dinner with them. But Jim was, he still is. He's a big supporter of the missionaries, always was in Chicago, and did a great job of just, if you were from BYU or you were a missionary, Jim was good with it.
That's cool. I read a quote where you once said, looking back, on your career. Being at BYU changed my life. What did you mean by that?
Well, Blaine will understand this. We are all a bunch of idiots. I remember Blaine as a freshman. He'd always let me in.
We were in the dorms together. Glenn and I were.
Yeah, Blaine was my knock on the window. Robbie would never get up, but Blaine would get up and let me in at 3 a.m. or whatever time it was. And he'd be like, okay, get upstairs and, don't be an idiot. I'm like, thanks, Blaine. So
I tried. You guys, I tried. Everybody out
sounds
there,
like you really tried.
So Robbie and I were on the first floor. Glenn you're on the second floor.
Right.
And back in those days, the dorms, they would lock you out at midnight. There was a curfew. And plus, I think Koz lost his key. So never fails.
Yeah, that's what we're going to go with.
Yeah,
I like that story.
Never fails. He didn't get it taken away. He just lost it. And never fail, like 1, 2, maybe 3 in the morning to be tap on the window, and we're on the ground floor, and Robbie would go, it's Koz, I am not getting up. And I would go, I'm getting up. And so I would get up, and Koz would go, can you meet me down at the end and let me in? I'm like, I got you, brother. And I would go down and let him in, and I would go, please just go up to your room and don't cause a ruckus so Sister Pierce doesn't come down on me too. Right?
Yeah. Yep, 100%. And the other thing I remember about Blaine is he'd be in front of the piano just playing away. And he has a great voice. People don't realize Blaine is talented musically as well, but he'd sing his little guts out, and I just wanted to punch him because all the girls would be like, oh, look at him playing the piano. And I'm going, are you kidding me?
Hey, Koz could sing too. He could sing too.
I couldn't sing, but I could sing in the shower, and you always sound better in the shower, by the way. Just FYI.
Yeah. Well, so we were there together as freshmen, and then and lots of people know a bit about your story, but it really did change your life because things weren't all rosy and great at first. There, we were great on the football field for you. Jim loved you as a receiver as a freshman. You'd come in early, and you were already contributing out on the field. And then things changed for a period of time, but you didn't quit on BYU. You went through some struggles and came back and finished what you started. Tell us a little bit about that and what that was like, and what made you just stick with it and come back.
Well, number one, the little blonde that I was dating, who is now my wife, she was pretty straightforward on the fact that she wasn't going with me. I was going to go to University of Miami, and, they were all set to take me, and I would set up a job for her. And she said, you know what, I'm not going to marry a guy or, date a guy that doesn't have the courage to stand up and come back and make it right. And, apparently you had to go to school, which I didn't realize, my first semester.
It is a requirement.
And you shouldn't break all of the rules and make up some new rules, right? So that, I paid the price, and Lavelle called me in. He said, look, we love you, but you gotta become a man. And I really appreciated it. So between Lavelle, Norm Chow, my old teammates, everybody was still reaching out. And of course, my lovely wife, Julie, said, no, I'm not going with you. So I said, okay, I'll come back, make it right. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. We actually had 3 kids before we left, or 2, and the third was in the oven at the time when I left BYU. So, it was the greatest experience. I actually went to class and, got an education. We all hung out together. Blaine and I were living in Plymouth Terrace in the same, quad.
Our kids were riding their big wheels around the quad in the morning. Yep.
My son, especially Brent, my oldest boy, he was like 2 years old, and he had the big wheel, and he'd get out at 5 a.m. and ride that quad.
Notorious for waking up everybody in the quad at 5 a.m.
Yeah, but at least you got up for school, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
But yeah, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And, I'm grateful that my sons had that opportunity, all of them, to go to BYU, whether it was BYU Idaho or, BYU Provo. It was, it's something that changes your life, and we're all better people because of it. But it did start with Lavelle, and then, good guys like Blaine. We were all in that same class together, and we just hung out and just had a good time. Vi Sikahema, he's in the red seats now, so he can't come on anymore, I'm guessing, right?
Oh no, we got to get him on, but we have to get permission
about him, right, boy?
Yeah, we get the story. We're not allowed to, once you get in the red seats, then we have to put those stories in the past about Vi.
Yeah,
so. I don't even remember any stories about Vi anymore, but yeah, it was a great time, and honestly, anybody that goes to BYU and they stick through it and they get through it, they end up leaving after 4 years. It's the best thing that you'll ever do. It really is.
We're visiting with former BYU and Chicago Bears receiver Glen Kozlowski on the Wise Guys. Isn't it interesting that decisions, even at a young age, can have such a lasting impact on everything that lies up ahead?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And, like I said, people don't really understand that competition between Blaine and Robbie. And, I'm probably over talking about this, but it was a thing of beauty. And, the tough part for Blaine and Robbie is our defense was so good in that spring. Remember, we couldn't even get a first down for like 2 weeks. I mean, they were just pummeling us. And I was fighting with everybody on the defense, right? Because I'm like, we got to get at least the first down. So I'm going to get in a fight with everyone until we got it. But it took us about 2 weeks. Yeah.
And Glen leaving and then coming back. People talk about Glen. You watched Jamal Williams, and he had a similar story to yours, where Julie said, "Hey, I want you to come back," and you were resolute and said, "I'm coming back. I'm going to come back, and I'm going to finish what I started, and I'm going to do it with a flourish." So he started out, Glen started out great. He was phenomenal as a freshman, one of the best freshman receivers we'd ever had. But then he came back after being gone, and he made a mark where he leaves as one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
I think you remember, Glen, that Jamal Williams came, and he left school, and UCLA and USC, much like Miami was recruiting. Miami was the best program in the country at the time. So when Glen says he had an opportunity to go to Miami, he had an opportunity to go to the multinational championship program, right, during that time, much like Jamal. Jamal's mom said, you committed. I want you to go finish what you said you were going to start, much like the conversation you had with Julie. And Jamal said, "Nope, you're right, Mom. That's what I need to do. That's the right thing to do." So he got things right. He came back to BYU, and he leaves one of the all-time greats in BYU history. Now he's representing BYU in the NFL in a phenomenal way. But Glen, you were the first guy that did that, and people forget about that. I want people to remember that you did that, and now Jamal has done that. They're two really similar stories, right?
Yeah, and even Reno Mahe. Same thing, right?
Yes.
So there have been a few guys along the way that have gone through it. But you know what? Lavelle was such a big part for me. And, Blaine will say the same thing. Dave Mills, to this day, when we talk about Lavelle, he literally, we call him Sluggo, bless his heart. He tears up talking about Lavelle. That's how important he was to all of us. And, he kind of just set the pace for us. We were all a bunch of idiots, but we loved playing football. And he kept us in line and kept us going. And, truthfully, when it was all said and done, we all look back now and just go, wow, I don't know how we survived it, but we did. And we're all better men for it. And so that is really what BYU offers. And I hope, as they move into the, what are we calling it?
Big 12. Yeah, still Big 12, yeah.
They might add 14. Who knows? Whatever is going to happen. That's still the feeling. And I feel like Kalani is doing that. He's trying to reestablish what Lavelle did. And, nobody could ever duplicate him, right, Blaine? I mean, He was one of a kind. He was basically, he ran it, now that I'm an active member of the LDS Church, he'd give us personal priesthood interviews, even though we thought it was just our exit interview. And he would give it all the time. And I mean, it was so funny. Like I had a standing Monday morning with Lavelle, then Glenn Tuckett, and then I had to go up to President Holland's office because I got scolded for swearing or whatever. I was an idiot. I mean, I just was. And, it was that process of working with those great men really helped me to grow up and become a better man myself. So, yeah, it's, you just can't say enough about what that experience is. And I wanted my sons to have it. And I want anybody that wants to go. It's not easy to get in, by the way.
Right.
Academically, it's a great school. So, it's moving in the right direction. 7-5 doesn't, it's not what they thought it would be this year. I'm glad to hear that, one of the coaches is moving on and you got to make changes always. I think it was 30% is what I always believed in. You had to make 30% change. And that doesn't mean, it's coaches or whatever, but you got to do things differently every year and you got to increase it and do it differently by 30%. And if you don't, you're going to fail. And I remember Blaine, Bill Walsh would be there. We'd have all these coaches coming in and just, watching spring practice and watching us practice during the year. And, some of our linemen, Louis Wong asked me the other day, Blaine, he goes, "Why did you guys never practice?" I said, "Because we didn't have to." It's so bad. He's like, the wide receivers, you guys were always in the training room pretending like you were hurt while everybody else was out practicing. And, it's just the way it was back in those days. It was, just a great time.
And we had, there's some coaching movement, and you mentioned that. People forget that back when BYU was on a really good run, there were a number of guys that were kind of coming through the program that would come and go. And we had, Glen and I had Ted Tollner on our staff. We had Mike Holmgren come through the program. Andy Reid was a graduate assistant through the program. Brian Billick was part of the program. Kyle Whittingham was a GA there. People don't even remember Charlie Stubbs. Charlie Stubbs was in our program with us. Charlie was the offensive coordinator for a national championship at Alabama, and he moved on and did things. Jim Lind, who was there, ended up being a big-time linebackers coach with Mike Holmgren up with the Seahawks when they were there.
And Green Bay also. He was there in Green Bay. And, the funny part, you bring up Mike Holmgren, and so he and I were talking when I was on the Bears, and he was the OC for the 49ers. He said, Kyle, I was never worried. And it's kind of funny. He goes, I was never worried, because we're talking about the offensive guys. He goes, I was never worried about you and Blaine. He goes, because I knew Blaine was always going to talk his way through anything. You had the ability to just say, I'm going to fight you and get it done. And so he never worried about us. It was interesting as he and I talked, and, there were some guys that he said, well, I just didn't think they'd make it. But, I bring it up now because we're on the air together. And I don't think I've ever said that to you, Blaine. And, but it was interesting because it would have been, I think it was 89, maybe 90. And I had gotten mad at Mike because they'd run up the score on us. Anytime we played the 49ers, they'd pump. I mean, it was ugly. And so, I was yelling at him. He's looking at me like, what's wrong with you, right? I'm like, you see Mike, and I'm just screaming at him. And then, he ended up at Green Bay as the head coach, and he and I spent a lot of time together there. And, Andy Reid, Ron Rivera, and my other guy, Les Frazier, who's the D coordinator now for the Buffalo Bills, and even John Harbaugh. So I had called Andy and said, hey, would you interview these guys, right? So I take full credit for those guys' coaching careers. But, Andy hired them, and these guys turned out to be, unbelievable coaches. Ronnie's still doing it. Les is doing it. I mean, it's Harbaugh, obviously, it speaks for himself what he's doing in Baltimore. And, it's funny when you look at all the connections and how much it works together. And think of the coaches we had, Blaine, when we were playing from 81 to 85.
Yeah, I look at those, Glenn, and
the list goes on and on.
Sometimes I look at those team photos of our championship years, and I'm thinking back about how many great players we had. And then I look at the coaching staff, and I'm thinking, well, maybe we weren't so good. Maybe we were really, really well coached when you look at those. But my point on all of that, Glenn, is that people get concerned when coaching staffs turn over and all that. But sometimes coaches come in for a time. They bring something to the program. They move on and they have success. Somebody else comes in. They bring something else. It's okay to have a little bit of turnover, and it helps the program move forward. People get all alarmed, and they call for people to be gone too soon. They get worried when they leave. But it's all part of the process, and Kalani can be the steady guy. People forget that we changed the offensive staff over a few years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, all the time we would roll it over, and these guys would go to the pros or the NFL, and they all had, they're still, Mike is retired now, but I mean, he ended up being the GM in Cleveland. I would never take that job, but he did. And, he did the best he could there. It's just kind of, you can't win in Cleveland, I think. It's just like, and apparently you can't win in Chicago anymore either. That's a new rule.
I know. I feel bad about that. I was talking to Jim about that when he was up here for Danny's funeral, for Danny Plater's funeral, and he's like, he just is like, I don't know if you can win in Chicago anymore. So,
yeah, well, it's it starts with the leadership. So the guy at the top, and like I said, even in business, I applied that to everything I did in my life. You got to make 30% changes each year. And it can be whatever it is, but if you don't make those changes, you're not progressing. You're not getting better. And I believe that with all my heart. And, that's what people come and go. but you got to keep making changes. And sometimes, the best change is the one where you just say, hey, we're not connecting. It's not working. It's time to go.
Glen Kozlowski on the Wise Guys got 141 passes for 2,302 yards and 24 touchdowns during his time at BYU, also an enormous part of the 1984 national championship team. And speaking of change, let's talk about the transfer portal. It's open. We think there's like 1,300 kids put their names in, somewhere around there. What do you think of this portal opportunity, and what is it doing to the college game?
It's killing it. So is the licensing, right? I mean, can you imagine, Blaine, if Kyle Morrell and the defense, saw you and Robbie get $1 million deals or whatever it might be?
I wish they saw that, but they
didn't. Yeah, well, so do I, for me also. But honestly, linemen wouldn't have blocked. I mean, I don't understand what they're doing, but, it's progress, I guess, and it's change, and that's what it is. I don't like it, but it doesn't matter what I like or don't like. So, but yeah, it's different now in college football, and you can get better right away. The guy out at USC, what's his name?
Caleb Williams and
Riley, right? The head coach.
Lincoln leaves from Oklahoma, and he brings a bunch of guys with him from Oklahoma to SC, and they're really good. And people don't like to hear this, but if Caleb Williams doesn't pull his hamstring on his long run, then they're in the college football playoff and not Utah in the Rose Bowl.
I think so. You know what I loved most about it, and Kyle is an old teammate. And I know, Blaine, you and Carrie and the Whittinghams, Kyle, you guys were very
close. Yep.
Yeah, really close, and they all lived together up at Fred's house and his wife's house up at up in the foothills there by Lavelle. I don't know how you did that, because that would have been too close for me. I'd have broken out in hives if Lavelle was. But I loved what Kyle did there, and it was listen, I always tell Utah fans, well, you had to go get a BYU guy to find.
That's true. That's a true statement right there.
It is, but I'm proud of what he's doing. And,
yes.
Like anybody that I play with and, my old teammates, I watch after them, I look at them, and I really appreciate everything that everyone's accomplishing. And it's fun to watch. That's all.
Got a few more questions with you. Let's get the confirmation of this one, and then we'll talk to you about the Bears a little bit. It's the Holiday Bowl. It's fourth quarter, 1984, 17-10 Michigan. The big question is, you're in the back of the end zone and you make this circus catch, among the best catches we've ever seen. However, was Robbie Bosco throwing that ball away and you went and caught it for a touchdown? Because Robbie gives us one story.
Yeah.
Blaine's pretty sure he was chucking it away.
He was thrown away, and Glen made the catch. Glen made it look good on that.
Yeah, he was. He'll say till he passes, I was throwing it to you, but I think he was tossing it out of the back of the end zone, and I just happened to, and literally the guy that hit me elevated me even higher because I jumped and then he jumped and he kind of pushed me up and I was able to catch it. I mean, I don't think I could have gotten that high if the guy didn't hit me. Number 5, I don't even know who he was, and then of course I pistol whipped the entire Michigan sideline, which Jim Harbaugh and I are dear friends now, and he said, man, everybody wanted to kill you on our sideline. And I said, yeah, I take great pride on being the guy that was most hated by anybody that played against BYU, and I'm proud of that.
Could you get away with the gunslinger? Like you used to do the gunslinger?
No.
Could you get away with it today, or would they just throw a flag every time now?
Oh, you get a flag. I mean, think about it. San Diego State, I shot down the 2 Nixon brothers, and they went crazy, and we started fighting in the end zone. And, in fact, I used to jump into the end zone in 84 and grab popcorn and everything else and high-five the fans when I would score. And, that's when they started adding all the rules and saying you can't do that. But we got away with it back then.
Yeah. It was a more fun game back in those days.
Yeah. The only time that Lavelle really got mad at me, we were playing UAU. Remember Earl Tucker, that little DB?
Yeah, the return guy that gave us fits.
And he was chirping all day, so I'd caught a pass over him, and I held the ball back at him as I was going into the end zone, and Lavelle lost it. I mean, he was not happy about that. Probably the first time I ever heard him use words that I never heard him say before.
You brought it out.
I remember hearing him swear at Kyle Morrell a couple of times for swearing in practice. He would swear at Kyle to stop swearing in practice, remember?
Yeah. Well, and Kyle and I had a rule that we would never fight each other, but we were always mixing it up with everyone, right? Because we just wanted the offense and defense to be on edge. And that really made us better, too. I mean, it was, our practices until we got to the season, it was ugly. I mean, we'd go at it every day.
I didn't realize that Kyle and Glenn had a pact. I knew
we did know there was
I knew that they never fought each other, but they fought everybody else. That explains a lot right there.
Right. And he and I talked about it, and I'll never forget, Blaine, I was more shocked than anyone when they named me captain in 84. I'm like, I don't want to be a captain. Are you kidding me? Now I got to talk and be nice and everything else. So it was really confusing for me. But that was part of the growing up process, and it was a wonderful year. And, Louis Wong gave the first prayer. Remember that, Blaine? Yeah. We'd all get together and the coaches would leave and we'd just hug each other and say a prayer. Yeah. And we continued that all 13 weeks. And, Dave Mills and I on the road broke every bed that we were in. We jumped back and forth till we broke one of the beds, and then we'd leave. And I'm pretty sure I have a big bill there, but as long as we won, they didn't send us a bill to pay for it. So
just so you know, I'll give you guys a little insight on these captains. When we got ranked up in the top 10, we start watching the polls and we start thinking, well, these guys need to lose. These guys need to lose. Like, we would literally talk to each other about it. Well, Lavelle and the staff would come in and say, listen, we cannot worry about any of that stuff. You just worry about our opponent this week. And then the coaches would leave and we'd have a players only meeting and Glenn would go, that's a bunch of crap. We need Texas to lose this week. We'd go through. We're winning. Glenn was the first one that said we were going to win a national championship.
Is that right?
He said, we got this thing. We're going to go get this thing. So, hey, I want to take you back. This is the best statistical performance of your. I feel like Glenn's greatest game may be the Michigan game because of how much it meant, right? But and that catch is one of the greatest catches I've ever seen on what we'll call Robbie's throwaway. But I want to take you back to the. I want to take you back. Take you back to 85 to our opener. We're back playing Boston College in the Kickoff Classic. 10 receptions, 241 yards, and that 28-14 win against Boston College. What was that like out there? I mean, you just dominated that game single-handedly. What's that like? That feeling like to know that they just can't even guard you in a game?
Well, I sure talked about it the whole game too, to all the defensive backs. And Bill Romanowski was like a sophomore and he kept trying to blow up my knee, right? Because I had a little knee brace on. And, you get in those zones. I had a 6'1", 240-pound cornerback and he was going man up. So poor Robbie, I was supposed to run a curl and I'd run a streak and then he'd underthrow me and I'd have to fair catch it. But like, I could beat this guy all day. And then, Mark Bellini was getting mad. He's like, I want that matchup. And we were fighting the whole game. And that was the difference, right, Blaine? We all thought we could make the play. We all wanted to make the play. And I just don't see that as much anymore with players. Guys kind of, I see it with Puka, right? Here's a kid that just said, hey, get me the ball, I'll make a play. But it took him a while to get to that point. We had 7 guys, including Blaine. Everybody thought they were the best and they could make the play. And, honestly, I think we all could. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about. You have confidence, you believe in yourself. They asked me before the game, they said, hey, what was your greatest catch? And I said, well, that's easy. It was my wife, right? So it's like, come on.
Good answer.
Writers started laughing. And then, the Sports Illustrated article where they said, well, you can't chase women at BYU. I said, oh, you can chase them. You just can't catch them at BYU. Right? I mean, it was easy. They were throwing me softballs and I was just hitting it out of the park with stupid stuff. But yeah, it was, that was a great game. But I never cared about how many catches I had as much. And this is something that I think is missing now. I didn't care if I caught 100 balls or 1 ball. If we won the game, that's what mattered the most. And we all believed in that. We always approached it that way as a team. And, I remember Kyle Morrell, we were getting ready and we were a little lackadaisical in 84 before the Holiday Bowl. And he threw that mustard bottle that missed like Kerry Whittingham and 3 other people by inches and splattered against the wall.
Oh, I remember that well.
So those were the kind of meetings that we would have once the coaches would leave. I mean, we held each other accountable and, we kind of still do it. Wouldn't you agree, Blaine?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
We still reach out and try to hold hold each other accountable and care for each other.
Last question before Blaine hits you up with 5 quick ones. Fast forward to 1988, Monday Night Football, San Francisco. McMahon hits you for a bomb, stretches you out, you catch it like the old days. You come back to the huddle. What do you say?
He goes, about time. So if you look, because really, I mean, I had a hard time cutting to the right because of my left knee. And so I really made my living on special teams. That Boston College game is where Mike Ditka fell in love with me. Remember, what was his name? Chris Ruth, the big.
Yeah. Mike Ruth, the big.
Mike Ruth, yeah. Steroid using
big
guy.
nose guy. Yeah, nose guard. I didn't say that. He said it, but.
And I don't care. I mean, honestly, and, bless his heart. And I'm sure now he'd probably admit it, because back in those days, it probably happened a lot more than we realized.
Yeah.
But, he gets an interception, and I ran I ran a hitch route. So he ran it outside, and I just 10-toed him. And then I stepped on his chest and wouldn't let him get up, and he's punching me, and flags are flying everywhere. That's what Coach Ditka fell in love with me. He goes, I love the fact that you 10-toed the guy and then put your foot on his chest and wouldn't let him get up. And, it really cemented my ability to play in the NFL. But my average was huge because nobody, they all thought, oh, he's not going to run by. I mean, I caught a ton of passes deep down the field. But, I really make my living tackling people and blowing up wedges. That's what I did.
Our fans are chiming in, and what one of them, Mike Z Just Me, says Koz got along with Ditka so well because they had the same mentality. I'd agree with that. You guys were both just tough guys, and there's a place for tough guys in football. And then BYU Sports Ethics said, my favorite quote from Ditka: if God had wanted a man to play soccer, he wouldn't have given his arms. That sounds like Mike, doesn't it?
Oh, of course. I mean, he would come in. I'll never forget. We were playing Minnesota, and it was 89. We had an awful year. A lot of our veterans got hurt. Our defensive guys were banged up, and he said we weren't going to win another game, and we didn't, because we all believed him. But I remember we were in Minnesota, and he said the good guy died in church today, and we thought he said his grandmother had passed away in church. So we end up blowing out Minnesota, and we give him the game ball on behalf of Lucid. He's looking at us like, what are you talking about, you bunch of idiots? So, I mean, he would give the greatest speeches that we couldn't hear most of the time because, he's everywhere and going crazy. But, yeah, Mike was a great guy. And, look at Jim Harbaugh. Look at, a lot of guys that are coaches now. Jim is probably the most like Mike, as far as college or pros go. Harbaugh is a maniac, and, Mike was a maniac too. And, he's still... Even to this day, Mike would throw down with anybody.
I believe that.
He is.
All right, we got 5 questions for the great Glen Kozlowski. You ready?
Yeah,
well,
these are
great, by the way, because, really, I was just another player on a great time at BYU and great teams.
Oh, I'm not letting him get away with that. Glen's one of the greatest receivers. When we start talking about Puka and his skill set, or we talk about Cody Hoffman, or we talk about Austin Collie, we always compare them to Glen Kozlowski because he's one of the all-time greats. So he's humble, but there's no question. Skill set, determination, leadership, one of the all-time greats in BYU history. So he doesn't have to say that, but I played with him, and I've watched him for 35 years or more as a broadcaster.
Well, we're now 40. We're coming up on 40 on 84.
Oh, don't even remind me of how old I am. So these 5 questions, Glen, are they're just rapid fire. You just like first thing that comes to your head. We do this with all of our guests at the end, and so and we get to know them. So your favorite sports movie?
That would be Brian's song.
Oh, see, it's a Bears theme.
Song. Yeah.
Well, but I remember I saw it when I was 12, and I was the guy that would fight anybody in school, and I was bawling my eyes out.
I cried my eyes out too on Brian's song. I got to tell you,
I'm 12 years old, and everybody's like, "He's not that tough. He's crying like that."
If you the first time you saw Brian's song, you didn't cry, then something's wrong with you.
That's right.
Okay,
go on.
Your favorite singer or band?
I really don't. I'm just not a big music guy. So honestly, I guess the Stones, Rolling Stones. I'll go with that.
That's good old school.
I was shoveling my neighbor's walk today listening to the Rolling Stones. They've never not been, hip and happening. So Stones is a great choice.
It's around like 90 years too. So
yeah. Well, I think a couple of the members of the band are dead and they're still in the band. So that's something. That's,
no one can tell.
Apparently, right?
Yes, that's something. So your favorite breakfast cereal?
Oh, that's Captain Crunch. That's a no-brainer.
Thank goodness. Because, by the way, we make fun of anybody that eats healthy cereal because we all believe in sugar-coated.
I had Captain Crunch this morning. That's a great choice.
Yeah, Captain Crunch. I mean, think about it. The Captain, it's nothing but sugar.
It's a little sugar in the kernels. So Dave also does the straight Captain Crunch. Some of us like the Captain Crunch with the Crunch Berries. You don't go for the Crunch Berries. You go for just the regular Captain Crunch.
Well, keep in mind when I grew up, we didn't have a lot. So if we got Captain Crunch, it was a fist fight and it was going to be the regular.
Okay, understood.
The berries were way too expensive to purchase when we were.
Okay, your favorite BYU moment. And it doesn't have to be with football. It can be any BYU moment.
I would say, and people will laugh, but I think it's the relationships that I got to develop with, in 81 when we all came in together. What was there, 38 of us, and only 8 of us made it through, when it was all said and done. So, my teammates, honestly, I miss that.
Yeah, and by the way, when he's talking about the 8 of us, what an unbelievable recruiting class, because we're talking about Glen Kozlowski, Leon White, Kurt Govea, Louis Wong, Robbie Bosco. I don't even need to keep going on. Unbelievable recruiting class that made a huge difference over their careers there. So Glen knows all about that. So, favorite advice you ever got from LaVell Edwards?
Shut your mouth, do your best, and then show up the next day and do the same thing. Honestly, it was pretty straightforward. He just said, "Hey, just shut your big mouth, do your best, and then do it tomorrow again." And, it's the greatest advice I ever got from him. And, I still try to shut my mouth, although I talk too much, kind of like you, Blaine.
Yes, we get Glenn and I together, forget about it.
And you're with WGN Radio, so you're still connected to Chicago as well, even though living here in Utah. That's one of the great things about technology. But how often are you back to the Windy City with work?
As little as possible. I mean, honestly, I love being out here in Utah. My family's here. A lot of my old teammates that I'm connecting with, and I will go back when I have to. But honestly, I'm happy to be here, and I love Utah. It's a great place, and I left it a long time ago and said I'd never come back. So everybody's like, "Why are you back for? You told us you'd never come back." And I said, "Yeah." I kind of blew that one. But, the cool part is we're going right now. My wife cuts grass at Eagle Lake Country Club in Roy, Utah, I might add.
Yes.
It is the home of the great Jim McMahon where he played. But, she has her big Christmas party tonight, so we're headed there. But, it's little blonde out there cutting the tee boxes all summer. It's hilarious.
She's the best. We give her all credit. We didn't know that anybody could tame the great Koz. But Julie did it and did a phenomenal job. She tamed the great Koz.
Well, I wouldn't say great, but yeah, she laid it out, and really, I raised 4 sons. They all went on missions. So I'm really proud of what she and I accomplished over the course of our life together. And we've got, 13 grandkids now, and our oldest is a dancer. And I got to get Blaine's daughter to talk to her at some point, because she's going to turn 16 this year, which is scary, right? It just ate all of us now.
You've got 1 week to go catch Libby in Moulin Rouge at the Eccles Center. She's on the national touring cast, and they're here at the Eccles in Salt Lake City through this next Sunday. So she's on her way down to. She's going on in about a half an hour.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Dave and I went to watch her last Saturday. We did the game at Vivint, and then we had some dinner, and we went and watched Libby and Moulin Rouge.
That's great.
So,
Glen, we salute you for all that you do, how you represent BYU, and how you're living your life, and we're just thrilled to death to have you on our show. We hope you'll come back again, and again, happy holidays to you and your family, and thanks so much for gracing us tonight and classing up our show.
Oh, yeah, right. You guys just lost a bunch of listeners, so I apologize.
People are loving it.
Get a better player on next time, and you'll do better.
Right. Hey, go to your party. Have a great Christmas.
Give Julie our love, and love you, my brother. You're the best.
You got it, Blaine. Love you, too. And like I said, I wanted to go on record that Blaine Fowler was an incredible quarterback. And unfortunately, I'm being serious here. It just we just had two of the best at the same time, and it was an eyelash between the two of them. And we always felt like if because Robbie would get banged up sometimes, nobody ever worried about Blaine coming in because we knew we'd be fine. So
well, he'll never be the same after hearing that tonight. So thank you, Glenn. We appreciate that. Hey, have a great night.
Have a great night, Glenn. Have fun.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Same to you, brother.
The great Glen Kozlowski.
He was the guy that you always wish. So when you get on the field, when Glen was on the field, and Robbie and I would talk about this all the time. If everybody looked like they were covered, just find 7 and throw the ball out there.
Yeah.
He's going to make a play.
Kind of like Puka.
That's how Puka is. And that's the best thing to ever have if you're a quarterback is that guy on the field that will never let the ball get intercepted and will most likely make a play. Just throw it to him.